Welcome to the Healogics Oncology Podcast. I'm John Tansler, Senior Vice President of Healogics, and today I'm joined by Mohamed Ladha, General Manager of a biotech company called OncoPeptides with U.S. headquarters in Boston. Welcome, Mohamed.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
What I thought I'd do, Mohamed, is first introduce OncoPeptides to those listening to us today. Now, OncoPeptides was formed in 2000 to develop anti-cancer drugs based on research by some of Sweden's leading cancer researchers and cancer research institutions. It was at that time that the new treatment for relapsed and refractory multiple myeloma, Pepaxto, or the generic melflufen, was patented. Now, during the early development of Pepaxto, OncoPeptides established a research collaboration with the Harvard Medical School Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in the USA. Now, phase 1 and phase 2 studies were started in 2012, and in 2014, melflufen received orphan drug designation in Europe and the US. In 2016, the phase 2 Horizon trials and the pivotal phase 3 Ocean trials were started. And on February 26th of this year, the FDA granted accelerated approval to Pepaxto in combination with dexamethasone for adults with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma who have received at least 4 prior lines of therapy and whose disease is refractory to at least one proteasome inhibitor, one immunomodulatory agent, and one CD38 direct monoclonal antibody. So congratulations, Mohamed, on getting FDA approval.
Thank you, John. The last part was mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about your recent launch. Tell me a little bit about Pepaxto.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are very excited about the launch. And, in this, if we take a step back and think about multiple myeloma, patients have many options today. Thank God they do. And because of that, the treatment armamentarium has gotten extremely complex. Due to that, multiple myeloma as we stand today still remains it's not curative disease. What that means is that patients end up getting multiple therapies that will prolong their disease to the next level. And because of that, you are always looking for new options. So with that in context, what Pepaxto has done has been able to provide options to those patients, like you highlighted in where FDA has given us a licensure, is these are patients who really have gone to 3 major classes of drug and have really, progressed on them or have not responded to them. And now Pepaxto becomes an option, right? So that's a great news if for a caregiver and if you're a patient in that setting. We are making a difference, right? So the difference we are making today is we are creating yet another option in this setting, call it your 4 prior lines, patients who have received 4 prior lines and are refractory to all those 3 major classes, that a few years ago, they will either get clinical trials, they would get, they may go on supportive care or just keep them comfortable. Today, that landscape has changed. And because Pepaxto is part of that, we feel very proud that we are able to provide another option for these patients. So that's what Pepaxto does for these patients. Now, as you highlighted, it is the first anti-cancer peptide drug conjugate that delivers, an alkylator agent very specifically to the tumor cells, right? So the way we look at Pepaxto today is that we have yet introduced another class in the fight against multiple myeloma, where these patients end up getting multiple therapies together, right? So in oncology, it's very common to get the drug combinations. Myeloma is one of those areas where that happens even much more than any other tumor types, but it happens multiple times. And now this allows the healthcare providers to, first of all, ask the scientific question, would we combine Pepaxto with other agents and prolong the disease progression and give them another hope to respond to the therapy?
Yeah.
So let me take a pause there and see if that answers your question.
Absolutely. I mean, my experience with multiple myeloma, it's such a complex disease. It sounds like that the most effective approach has been, attacking it from multiple directions. So the idea of using combined agents, and the fact that Pepaxto is a new class and acts differently than what they've had before, it's got to be exciting to the doctors you're talking to.
Absolutely. Now, as you highlighted, those studies are ongoing, and we'll be reporting them in due course. But today we have an opportunity now to provide the healthcare providers to investigate, to ask the question in a clinical trial setting: can I combine Pepaxto as another, peptide drug conjugate class with other agents, and what does that do? Now we have been blessed that some of the data has come out with. We highlighted the CD38 directed monoclonal antibody. In our case, it was Darzalex or daratumumab, and we have shown some promising results. Clearly, these are preliminary, and now we are testing that in a much larger trial setting called Lighthouse. And I think that's going to allow us to answer the question: what does it mean for patients to get 3 drug combination with Pepaxto being one of them? And that study is already ongoing. So that's just one example. We plan to do something very similar in the future. The one thing about myeloma that your audience should know is that the day you start research, within a year or two, that element of research or the treatment landscape evolves already. Yeah. So that's an ongoing challenge for the investigators, for the pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, is that you have to kind of think about where treatment landscape may be in the next couple of years and try to address that accordingly. And I think we are trying to do the same to make sure we remain current with the research and development.
Yeah. Well, the entire field of oncology is evolving so quickly. I've often tell my colleagues that, over the last 10, 15 years, seems like there's been more advances in oncology than there has been, in the prior 50. And it's moving, it seems like it's just accelerating. It's going faster and faster. So, having that forward-looking approach, to be able to meet the needs of the patients, not only today, but the patients tomorrow, I can imagine is pretty important.
Yeah, it sure is. And I think, one thing is part of core values of OncoPeptides is to ensure that we keep patients first, or, what is that patients prefer, what would be the right thing to do for the patient. Of course, that happens to healthcare providers. So we have to, and that's nothing earth-shattering. Many companies do that. It's more about walking the talk, right? And ensuring that we stay on top of this. And we are very excited because we have a new class of drugs that with a novel mechanism of action that FDA also felt very important to provide that in patients who have at the later lines of their treatment. And it just provides another option for these patients and their healthcare providers to consider.
Excellent. So, Mohamed, you and I have known each other for quite a while. So, Pepaxto is not the first drug you launched, but what was interesting about this is, you joined OncoPeptides like in 2019. Right before the world went black. So, what specific challenges, did you face having to launch a product and put it together a team in the middle of a global pandemic?
Yeah,
I know that's a giant question.
No, it is a giant question, and it can take multiple hours or a few hours to discuss. Let's start by saying that any launch is always challenging, right? So I've been privy to have more than 10 or 12 launches in the U.S. and across the globe. There are always challenges, right? Because that's what I think makes the launches exciting. They create an opportunity where we can sometimes make a difference in the treatment landscape, in patients' lives. So that to me is not a new thing, right? The challenge is always the same. The difference with this launch was a number of things. So number one is this was, OncoPeptides, as we discussed, is a very well-known company in Europe, in Sweden. In US, this was building that, name recognition, but before that, trying to get the team together. So, that's one challenge is trying to build the name recognition. Number two is trying to build the infrastructure and trying to bring the people together. And it's just not any person, right? It's to ensure that it meets our business needs, and individuals are definitely going to be highly motivated, well-seasoned, people who can wear multiple hats. We were lucky that we were, our humble beginnings in the U.S. started in the Bay Area. So you do find a lot of talent, but we do also realize that with our global colleagues being in Stockholm and other parts of Europe, it made sense to be closer to those colleagues, at least from a time zone perspective, but also be an area where we can find talent. And that's why we decided to have our regional headquarters for the U.S. region in Boston. We actually located just at the outskirts of Boston in a city called Waltham, where there are a number of other biotech companies and pharma companies. So, that was the other thing, other decision that we made. And this was just pre-pandemic, right? So we're talking about I joined in the first quarter of 2020. Those are the kind of things to do is like, most of the launches I've done have been where I had a physical building, there were people we were recruiting, but there was already at least some talent already recruited sometimes, or at least infrastructure exists. None of that was here. So you're kind of debating what printers you're getting and what cubicle size you're going to have, and what computers and monitors. And that to me was I always appreciated it, but when you have to do it, that's a whole different experience. Yeah. So we were able to get that all done in the first part of the year under the pandemic, and we'll get into the pandemic in a minute. So to now give you an idea that we were just starting in US, no infrastructure, less than 20 people in the field and in our Bay Area office. Now we have to build a whole new infrastructure right here in Waltham, and trying to launch the drug, which we thought we'll have it by early part of this year. So in less than a year, you have to do all that. Now, nothing new, happens all the time, but that extra element here is that you're building the infrastructure. You don't even have an office space. You have to establish all that. And you're launching in a marketplace where there are a number of options for patients, right? Clearly, we were going to be one of those options as well. So you have to work through the market dynamics of being it's a crowded market. You need to find your space. You have to, promote based on what the FDA allows you to promote. So you kind of have to work through all that while, making sure that you have the right talent in place. Now, you layer all that, I believe it was March 12th or 13th when we in the U.S. said that, okay, COVID-19, I'm talking about March of last year, COVID-19 is a real thing. So we went into where we were trying to build an office, have people in the office to complete shutdown of the, at least the physical office interactions, and we all went virtual. And that was in the beginning, I must say, and I think you'll hear the same story from many people. We're all trying to figure out what that means, right? So imagine an environment where you're trying to bring new team members, and it's not one or two. We're talking about more than 100, and all trying to do that virtually, and at least be launch ready before the end of the year to ensure that the market preparedness and all that's happening.
I was going to say I can't think of another example that requires collaboration of a large team more than a product launch.
Oh,
so being able to get that collaborative environment in a virtual setting must have been really challenging at first.
Yeah, it is challenging, but I think it's also the kind of individuals you hire. So, I usually pay a lot of attention to, clearly you want the therapeutic expertise, you want the functional expertise. But above that, what I really pay attention to is a number of things, right? Do I sense that this individual or set of individuals have passion to what they do, right? Can they demonstrate to me that they are passionate about whatever they get engaged? Are they going to be team players, right? That's the other thing I pay a lot of attention to. Are they going to be able to collaborate with across the company, not just within the U.S. region, our global colleagues in Sweden and other parts of, and then can they deliver, right? Can they deliver results? Because at the end of the day, that is what really matters. Yeah. And then are they like what I call as those go-getters, right? Like somebody who very much. And I think it's not easy. The part that made it easier for us is that we were a new company. We had tailored our roles, which are not your traditional roles, right? I mean, if you look in the field, we called our, what you'll call as a traditional sales, or we call them our account managers, because we see them as our quarterback. They bring in different resources into the practice as needed, and nothing new, but it's not that many companies that do that. So that's number one. Number two is ensuring that, when we are creating our roles and responsibilities and job descriptions, that these jobs are unique, meaning we are just not focused on them being very siloed in what they do, but they kind of have bandwidth to grow. And, a lot of individuals who have worked, and seasoned individuals who have done this for many years, they're looking for something that will give them independence, ability to work with others, but command many areas of responsibility. And I think that was a key for us to attract a lot of talent. And now, why do I bring that up? I think if you get those fundamentals right? So we talked about, we had a product that we felt very confident. We built the infrastructure to support the organization. We bring in the people with these characteristics I just talked about. Now what you have to do is allow them to now function together. And I'm very proud of our team, both in the U.S. and across the globe, in Stockholm as well, where people will get on the call at wee hours of the day, it didn't really matter, and get things done. And to me, that was quite critical, because in the pandemic, while you're doing pre-planning, a lot of this gets done. I mean, we had to adjust to doing them virtually, but we got them done as quickly as we can. Now, John, you did ask about, was it challenging? Absolutely. I mean, if I were to agree to that, then that is not true. So if it was challenging, what did we do about it? So I gave you all the fundamentals. The other thing we did was build a very strong culture. And, you and I have talked about what I call as the ABC, right? The ABC is attitude. Attitude builds your behavior, which is the B, and the B, behavior builds your culture. That's the C, right? The ABC. And what was important for us is that we keep this team very much glued together through other interactions, because culture, building a strong culture where we call ourselves as the Onco family, OncoPeptides family, that is. And one of the key elements we did was, I'll pick up the phone and call some of those team members, similar to if I were to be in the office, I'll go next to their office or cubicle and say hello and have a chat. So I would do that because, it did create a sense of, sense that there was somebody who cared and somebody who was there to talk to each individual, because we are all very much virtual. So that's number one. Number two is that we did a lot of virtual events, be it 4th of July, be it Memorial Day. We would be sharing some gifts with our new hires and what have you. When it came to Halloween or holidays, we did a lot of that, right? And we would have like a weekly call where anybody who wants to call in could call in and have a discussion with us. So I think that allowed some avenue to have a continuous discussion.
Yeah.
Did it help? Absolutely. Did it address all our challenges? Probably not, because we're all learning too. But it definitely helped, right? I want your audience to know that this is something that we are all learning through, but I think we did quite well.
Now, I know one of the challenges you had, particularly since this is a new class of agent that works different than what's been out for, I know there's some disease state preparedness. Those are pre-launch communication that you typically have with your key customers. I mean, how did the pandemic impact your ability to communicate some of these disease state issues with your audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had to adapt very quickly. So first of all, we knew some of the key areas where there's a high unmet need, which we would be able to address. So that's number one. But number two is trying to understand what does this, if those unmet needs, do they translate into what is important for the physicians? And, we were able to do all of that work up front in the first half of last year, and then take that learnings and create our disease state awareness platform. And I would say that was, so then now you're in the execution phase, right? So we don't really have congresses or any of that was happening live. So we have to get creative and go completely digital. And going digital meant that, your investment dollars, your priorities have to be focused on that area, because everybody else is doing that, right? We are not the only one that is doing that. So, utilizing some of the advanced analytics and ensuring that we are not more of the same, we were able to understand some of those dynamics and be very targeted appropriately in terms of who we really wanted to hear that message. And I think it did have dividends, and we ended up raising awareness appropriately in this setting. And that continues to improve as we prepared for launch earlier part of this year.
Okay. One of the things that's always impressed me about OncoPeptides is, particularly during the pandemic, is how flexible and how quickly you're able to adapt to things. I think that's one of the advantages that perhaps you had over some of the larger companies who are embedded and have all these procedures and processes in place, they were a little bit more immovable. So, as you've made some of these adjustments and it's been almost a year that we've kind of lived through this, as the world starts to open up and people become more and more vaccinated, what are some of those techniques? What are some of those processes you put in place? Do you think you'll continue to hold on to, as opposed to kind of going back to, the face-to-face reps showing up at the doctor's office and having all these, advisory meetings and everything else in person? I mean, are there certain things that you're going to continue to pursue, even if the world opens up?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think it's both ways, right? One is, what is it? I always ask the question, what is the most efficient way of doing what we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think there is always a clear answer, but you definitely have some guiding posts that allow you to get there. So number one, let's talk about individuals or team members who work for OncoPeptides, and we made it very much a flexible model that said, if you feel comfortable being in physician's office and they allow you to meet in person, you can do that, but that's your decision, right? We left it up to our team members to make the decision. We were very flexible on that. Many companies said, no, we are only going to be virtual, and I understand that. I mean, I'm not saying that's not the right decision, but we felt that, as a new company where you're trying to establish that branding of the company and trying to get some traction, that we needed to be flexible, right? That we wanted to make sure that our account managers and our MSLs had that optionality. Now they can decide how to interact with their customers. So that's number one. But number two is also, what is the customer's preference, right? A number of those customers, it really varied geographically, would prefer to just be virtual. And that's okay. I mean, we were then going to work out how do you engage them virtually. So that's number two. But then there are some places where they said, we will see you in person as early as late last year, right? So that's great news, and that did happen. So those are the field-facing or customer-facing interactions. When we came to our office-based staff, we actually opened up again on a limited basis last summer, actually a year ago, in June, and we had the offices open. So having said that, we were what we call them as our collaboration days. What that meant was we established, okay, we can all work from home, but let's try to, as a new company, let's try to meet in person. If you believe you feel safe, you feel coming to office. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays became our collaboration day. We clearly offered meals that day, and I would say at any given time, we would have 50-60% of the team members come to office. And of course, we had to follow all the COVID-19 procedures as highlighted by CDC and the state of Massachusetts, and also the city of Waltham. And we did something similar in our offices in the Bay Area, Los Altos, though in California, things were a little more restrictive than they were appropriately than they were in Massachusetts, because these are driven by the state. But that did allow for those flexibility. We call it optionality with flexibility. Like, if you want to work virtually, do that. If you want to come to the office, do that. And it's not every day. And I think it created a healthy balance between individuals. The challenge that it created, and it would have done either way, is that you would have some members who are in the office, and when you're doing any Zoom calls or things like that, all of us are in the conference room masked, with a sanitizer, check our temperature, and the other half would be on a call that may be local too. So that to me was the nuance. And then there's a third component that you brought up, which is how do we engage folks through advisory board or speakers bureau and things like that. And I would say that it has actually opened up more opportunities to do things virtually because there's advisors don't have to travel. They're sitting right at their office, doing this over a couple of hours, 3 hours, whatever your time frame is for this advisory board, and they're more accessible. But there is a Zoom fatigue. I think where we are today, John, there is a Zoom fatigue where people want to meet more in person, and we are seeing a lot of that in our some of the promotional programs where we offer virtual versus in person. There's a lot of appetite to do in person. So to answer your question, so those are some of the things we have touched on. I think COVID-19 has taught us few new things, right? Number one is that we can work to a certain degree efficiently virtually, right? It's something we didn't fully appreciate. I think technology has really helped us. Imagine having this back in 2000. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine how it worked under those circumstances. Maybe it will be TC lines and things like that. But so I think the virtual component is going to get more and more prominence, but it is going to be a healthy balance with some face-to-face interaction, meaning there is going to be a role of, folks meeting in person, be it in the office or meeting with the customers. But the third component that we have now implemented is what we call as, come to office on collaboration days, but then some of the other days like Mondays and Fridays, work from home. So that creates that flexibility, right? That, okay, I only have to be in person office 2 or 3 times a week. That's something I can do. Imagine the Boston traffic going on Mass Pike into the city. It always was challenging, and it remains challenging as traffic picks up. So I think that allows that flexibility that we are going to keep it permanent at this point is, work from home Mondays, Fridays, be in the office as your circumstances allow those days. It's the same thing with our customers, right? A lot of our customers still prefer to meet virtually. And sometimes they're giving you more time. What we have realized is that if they do some of this engagement virtually, you do get more time. The only challenge is that, when you are having a engagement through lunch and learn and things like that, you are virtual, but the staff is in person, and it's in and out, and that remains a challenge, right? So that we need to continuously optimize. I don't think we have a solution today, to be honest, but I think that's something that we'll have to keep working with. And same thing with some of the other engagements through speakers bureau and things like that. So hopefully that's giving you a flavor of how we are operating. And
absolutely.
I'm sure other companies are following similar suit.
Well, speaking of Zoom fatigue, I don't want to keep you much longer, but tell me what's next for Pepaxto? What's the kind of the priorities now going forward in 2021, 2022?
Sure. No, that's a great question. So we are in our 4th month of launch, right? We are in a week or so. We will be celebrating our 4th month anniversary. So that's an important milestone for us. It doesn't happen that often that you get to launch a product and within a few months get another major phase 3 readout, and that's where we are. We are going to be reporting that data, which was a randomized data against pomalidomide dex. So this will be Pepaxto dex or dexamethasone versus pomalidomide plus dex in slightly earlier lines of therapy, 2 or 4 prior regimens, therapies. So we are evaluating the data. We are having discussions with our regulatory agencies, and the plan is to get that level expansion or level change is hopefully sometime by next year. So that's kind of on the docket in near future. And then I talked about multiple new studies that we have. This is where we are. We continuously are putting new studies in place. And then our investigator-initiated program, the IITs or ISTs. Clearly, these are instigated, or the interest comes from the investigator. So that program is keeping up. So you can see a lot of trials. We are a very science-based company, and we believe that the way to build confidence in the new platform and in Pepaxto is to have multiple clinical trials that will tell us what's the benefit of this drug, and appropriately ask for label change if the studies support better outcomes. So that's what's for Pepaxto in midterm, and continuously. What I do every day is when I wake up in the morning, what's next for Pepaxto? In my mind, it's like, have I done everything? Has the team done everything to ensure the appropriate patient in 4 prior lines and who are refractory to this triple class are able to get Pepaxto, be it from awareness, be it from building confidence, be it from access.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mohamed. Again, it's Mohamed Ladha from OncoPeptides. They just launched Pepaxto for relapsed and refractory multiple myeloma. I highly recommend that you go check out their website, OncoPeptides.com, and see what they're up to. Again, thank you, Mohamed. This has been awesome.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, John. Have a good day.